I mean, I've had the joy of being able to work in Japan a number of times. When I was at Apple in the 90s, we were working with Sony, we were working with Toshiba, Hitachi, and I really enjoyed working in the Japanese work environment. But I also noticed that it was different than the U.S. environment. There was more hierarchy, there was more rules. I was really curious when I was doing the research for the book about these terms, which are incredibly derogatory. I mean, they're mean, nasty. If you call someone the dog of the company, mean thing to say.
Yes. People are going across the street. It used to be just for more money, now it's for more money and for more meaning. So this issue really is rolling slowly across the entire globe. Different cultures are receiving it very differently, but it's a human problem. And so the change is we're not putting up with it anymore.
It's going to be more disrupted, in the future, and technology is changing faster. And then there's AI is coming and jobs are changing. So the job world is changing rapidly. I believe the only logical approach.
So in your book, it's interesting you picked up some Japanese terms, such as 会社の犬, which is company's dog, and 社畜, slave of a company. And there's, first of all, so what do you think of that word? So how did you encounter that such Japanese word? And my second question is that there's another term in the Japanese company culture called Yome Block or Otto Block, which means spouse block. So it means that when you want to change your life or design your own life or switch a company from a big company to a startup, your spouse blocks you, There's a, yes. So, yeah.
Right, because it's too much risk, right?
Right.
I mean, I've had the joy of being able to work in Japan a number of times. When I was at Apple in the 90s, we were working with Sony, we were working with Toshiba, Hitachi, and I really enjoyed working in the Japanese work environment. But I also noticed that it was different than the U.S. environment. There was more hierarchy, there was more rules. And so I read a lot of books and studied, how to, I didn't want to be a rude, American. I wanted to be, respectful of the culture. But, the Japanese work culture is unusual. It's like no other culture in the world. And, if you think about the history of, building the entire nation and becoming a major economic powerhouse in the world in a very short period of time, people worked very hard and at one time had lifetime employment. And, there was a contract between workers and companies that, we'll just all do the right thing and Japan will survive and will thrive. But now we're in a completely different generation of workers. They're not trying to build the nation. They're just trying to have, a good life, and they're expecting more out of work. And work isn't changing fast enough for them. So there's all this tension. And I think that's why, I was really curious when I was doing the research for the book about these terms, which are, incredibly derogatory. I mean, they're mean, nasty. If you call someone the dog of the company, mean thing to say. But I think it just reflects the frustration that a lot of workers have in that the companies haven't changed fast enough for this new generation of workers. You mentioned that a lot of your audiences are working in startups or they're working in smaller companies, and they're making that choice, even though they may be giving up some stability or security, because they want a work environment that will honor their efforts. Right?
Great, yeah. So that's why our publication is called PIVOT, because we want to encourage people to pivot, from just staying at a single company, lifetime employment to, switching jobs, working at a startup. So my question is that after you use your tools, you use your dashboard, when's the right timing to switch jobs or leave a company?
Well, the honest truth is, for your listeners, I'm not sure that we know. Bill and I both have multiple versions of a story where we had the experience, of the way I put it is you wake up one day and you realize the job left you. It's not you left the job. But you get to the place like, I'm really done with this. Now, we're both guys, I'm about to turn 70. Bill's a little younger than I am, but together we've been working for about 80 years. No, and I've had dozens of jobs, and I was unemployed for 25 years. I was a freelance management consultant, meaning I was a gainfully unemployed marketing guy. I couldn't quit because I had no job. But it made a very good living. So the truth is, as we talk here today, we are not the person who's got spouse block as their primary worry. So when should that? Now you probably.
By the way, that happens in the U.S. too. That's not a Japan only phenomenon. You've got to involve your spouse, because you put the whole family at risk.
For your listeners, I think many of them they're way past the point where I think this job is done with me and I'm done with this job. So that would be the moment when Bill and I would start quitting. Now, when I would quit, I'd quit like 10 minutes later. One time Bill did it a year later. He did a whole year getting ready to leave. But now you're way past that point. And now I think the time when you really should go is when you've been so unhappy at work for so long, you're doing bad work, you're angry all the time, you're mean to your wife and your children, and it's starting to turn on you. Now, it's not merely that the job is bad, but the job is bringing out the worst in you. You're starting to become a worse version of yourself because you've been in bad work for too long. That's the time to get out. You want that now it's almost too late. So I think for many of your listeners, the opportunity to move on is probably the timing for moving on is here. It's here right now. All we have to do is get you ready to go. Is it time to go? It's now. Just you're not ready. The only problem is you're already past the point when you probably should leave. It's just, are you ready? Have you got your resume together? Have you found the opportunities? Have you got your psyche ready to deal with everybody going, are you crazy? You gave up a good job? You got to be ready for, everyone's going to think you're crazy. So there's the timing when you should go, there's being ready to go, and then there's going. But the too late time is when you're starting to become a worse person. It's not worth shrinking your soul.
Yeah.
Bill, do you? Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. Now, I happen to have an absolutely wonderful spouse. And when the opportunity came to leave my consulting firm where I was making lots of money and go to Stanford and run the program, because David Kelly said, could you come and run the program for me? And I said, yes. How much will you pay me? And it was about 40%, 50% of what I was making. So I had to go back to my wife and say, listen, this is a pretty big change. And she said, do it. I support you. This is what you really always have wanted to do. So, we'll find a way. But if she had said, we really, we got to get the kids through college and we've got to do it, then I would have had to reframe and find a new way to stay in the job I had, because I was starting to get like Dave. I was starting to get angry. I was starting to get restless. I was starting, it just wasn't working. And then it gets pretty bad. People will use, alcohol and drugs to kind of numb their feelings. And then, then it's way too long. You need to go. You need to get some help and go. But if you don't have to go all at once. You can take little tiny steps. You can take little tiny steps. You can just start having coffee once a week with some friends at other companies just to see what's going on. You can, if there's something you really like, Dave's friend who likes to do music, you don't have to do an entire symphony. Post 2 songs on SoundCloud and see if you get any reactions. Post a video on YouTube. Use a fake name. Put on, glasses so nobody knows who it is. There's lots of little things you can do because you are free. The job doesn't own you.
I also want to ask you about the pandemic, because, there's a pandemic, there's war in Ukraine, there's a lot of layoffs in tech companies. I hear a lot of news in the United States. Terrible. And also quiet quitting, there's a term I read in some papers.
Quiet quitting?
Yeah. So Could you
And the big quit, we had 47 million people quit last year.
Right. Could you tell us the circumstance, what's happening in the United States in terms of jobs?
Well, there are a couple of things happening. The Great Resignation, that 47 million people Bill just met, if you look at the Gallup research organization, they've been analyzing employee engagement for 23, 24 years now. And the data in North America on employee engagement has been terrible the entire time. Between 2 out of 3 and 3 out of 4 people have been disengaged ever since they started taking the data, which means, and for 100 years before that. So everyone's going, suddenly everybody quit after the pandemic. What happened? What changed? What new issue has arisen? And our analysis is none. There is no new problem. There is a new intolerance for an old problem. The old problem is, I know work's not that interesting. I know it doesn't mean very much to you. I know your boss doesn't really care about you as a person, but just put your time in and we'll pay you more money and you'll be fine. And people said, okay, I'll wait. And they did that for a quarter of a century. And then the pandemic, a bunch of things happened. First of all, let's be clear. Everyone on planet Earth was at risk of dying. So literally an entire globe experienced an existential crisis. Like, is this worth dying for? No. And so what happened is people were like, wait a minute, this is my, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being this unhappy. So the pandemic got people's attention, and then they said, no, I'm not going to be, I don't want to be this disengaged at work. I want a better job. I want a good life with a good job in it. And so that demand has a lot to do in particularly North America and in Europe, but we're hearing it's moving down through Australia, it's moving down through Indonesia and East Asia. People are going across the street. It used to be just for more money, now it's for more money and for more meaning. So this issue really is rolling slowly across the entire globe. Different cultures are receiving it very differently, but it's a human problem. And so the change is we're not putting up with it anymore, which frankly is a good thing.
I asked you this because there's so much uncertainty in the world.
Sure.
So even though you're able to, design your own life, there's so many things you cannot design, so many things which is out of control. So how can we deal with things we cannot design?
Well, and you mentioned, that's why we called it disruption design. There's not just the pandemic. There's, a global energy crisis now. There's a war in Europe that could spiral out of control. Who knows, right? There's the climate crisis, which isn't going to go away just because, you can't get a vaccine for the climate crisis. And, when we were writing the book in Northern California, we were having these massive fires were happening. And so it really did sort of sometimes feel like maybe the world is coming to an end or something. But here's the thing. It's going to be more disrupted, in the future. And technology is changing faster. And then there's AI is coming and jobs are changing. So the job world is changing rapidly. I believe the only logical approach is to stop trying to plan and control your future and design your future, because the circumstances will change, but then but you're more resilient because you can redesign for the circumstances. If you have a rigid plan, I just want to stay in this company and be a financial analyst, and I'm going to try to be here until we retire. And then the company, invests in cryptocurrency and blows up. Who knows, right? Just don't know. So, you're right. You cannot control the future. Design isn't a magic wand where everything's going to be beautiful in the future. But a designer's mindset is one that embraces, like, AI is coming. Well, I think that's really interesting because it'll generate as many new jobs as it eliminates. I've been through, when I got out of college as a young engineer, we were still using drafting tables and drafting boards and drawing pictures, with pencils. And now I was just on my laptop the other day designing something in 3D CAD, and I was going to, I'm going to build a deck out at my house. So it's like everything's changed, but everything's new, and there's new jobs to have. So I think if you think like a designer, you learn some of these tools and some other design tools, like mind mapping. It's a great way to come up with new ideas. Then you're more resilient, because sure, stuff's going to change. But designers change the rules all the time, and we're good at that.
So design doesn't mean that having 100% control of your life, but more.
It's a flexible approach to problem solving.
This is a very, very important thing. See, this is where there's a deep misunderstanding that I would argue is rooted in that other kind of design we talked about. Graphic design, ergonomic design, like, the guys that shape the cars, right? They take a big clay thing and they shape it, like the early Prius, what people don't understand is like 40% of the efficiency of a Prius was aerodynamics, had nothing to do with the engine. Now, I can control that because I've got a shaper and that's clay, and I can make it be exactly what I want. I'm going to design it. I'm going to make it obey me. That's design. I designed exactly my birthday cake, and it's got this diagram on it. It's got 6 candles. It's that's what design means. No, design thinking, innovation design, what we teach is a methodology of innovation to solve a problem. What it really is a highly adaptive methodology. Design thinking does not exempt you from change by giving you control. It allows you to accept change and adapt to it by giving you tools. You are powerful not because you can stop change. So when people say, I really want to design my way out of being a victim of this change, what they really mean is I want to stop the change. I want to stop the world. I want to exempt myself from change. Can't do it. So what we do, and if I was the kind of designer who could make something be just what I want it to be, here's a piece of wood, I've got a saw, I can make it any shape I want. I'm designing it. No, that's a different kind of design. This is the kind of design that says we start with acceptance. What is going on? All the tools that Bill and I are offering work in one place and one place only. Reality. I wish Japanese companies weren't so stiff. Yeah, that's great. They are. How do we design there? Reality is where it happens. Reality is the only place it can get better because that's where your life actually is. We're not saying it's okay, by the way. This acceptance we talk about does not mean endorsement. Like, we think Japanese management is brilliant. All those big companies, they're brilliant. Well, first of all, they got there for a reason. They didn't do everything wrong. Let's not be unfair. However, you don't have to like it to accept it. 2 years ago, my wife died of cancer. I don't like it, but I accept it. If I don't accept it, I haven't got a chance of being happy now. I mean, if not accepting that is not going to bring her back. So if you want things to get better, you got to get here first.
So I asked this question because not everyone can attend Stanford, our readers. So could you give us...
You don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to. Okay. So how can we start our own workshop here in Japan?
And here's a whole bunch of tools. You can read any chapter in our book in any order. You don't have to read chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. You can read chapter 5, 3, 8, 6, 1, 2, conclusion, introduction. You're fine. Doesn't matter. Because it's just a toolbox, right? You open up a toolbox, you take out the hammer first, then take out the screwdriver. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Which tool do I need? So we're just a set of tools. I mean, the book's logically organized, but it could be logically organized 9 other ways. So the workshop just takes the most important tools, gets them across quickly, and then it's all about using the tools. Learning the tools is easy. Using the tools takes time.
Yeah, it does. Because it has to become a practice. And we have started teaching Designing Your Life workshops in Japan. And it got interrupted a little bit with COVID, and we couldn't meet, in person. And now we have a version of it online. And it was very interesting because, of course, as you pointed out, I mean, the Japanese work world is very different than Silicon Valley for sure. And then the Japanese have a different culture, a very collective culture, and maybe a more private culture than Silicon Valley. So people sharing some of these things isn't as comfortable. So we've worked almost 2 years to really first of all, put the whole program in Japanese and make sure we didn't miss anything, but also to make it more appropriate for the Japanese context. So for instance, when we do something like in the US where we would brainstorm and do lots of, post-its on a board and be very collaborative, in Japan, we might do that a different way, which we call a silent brainstorm, where we just take a piece of paper and just move it around the table, do it in a more controlled way. Or when people are sharing their ideas, they might just share it with the instructor rather than with the whole group. But it's the same basic idea. And look, everybody, although we express ourselves differently in different cultures, everybody's a human being. Yes. Everybody deserves happiness of some sort. Everybody deserves to have.
Thank you so much. So, David, we'd like to wrap up. And so our viewers and listeners are probably watch this video in the end of the year or maybe in January. So they will be making their New Year's resolution. So like any final advice for our viewers that want to design their own work life? So can I start with Bill?
That's you, Bill. Yeah, I just talked a lot.
Oh, sure. I mean, first of all, I don't know if there is a tradition of doing New Year's resolutions. There's a big tradition in the U.S. Everybody does their New Year's resolutions.
Same in Japan.
And then by March, 90% of the resolutions.
Yes. So, same in Japan.
So one, if you're going to do a New Year's resolution, make a resolution to do something small. Set the bar low, do something, practical and small, and then do it again and again. Because the way you get to the top of the mountain is in many, many, many small steps, right? But I would also say, my advice would be, start the year with curiosity. It's a new year. There's so much to be curious about, so much to learn. Start with curiosity, and that's gonna. I guarantee you, if you could find that curiosity, that curious kid you were when you were 5 or 6 years old, and everything in the world was interesting, if you could tap into that energy, that would start a process that, a year later you wouldn't be stuck.
Amazing. Thank you, Bill. How about you, Dave?
Oh, I think Bill said it well. I don't want to muddy it. I think let's close with that.
Okay. Thank you, Dave and Bill-san. I think this will end our interview, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.